This is AM Agenda. With me this morning now, Liberal frontbencher Paul Fletcher. Paul Fletcher, I've got a fair bit to get across, but let's start with the thing that I picked, wrapped up with Richard Marles on, this request for Australia to expand airstrikes. I guess I know you're not in the defence portfolio, but any thoughts on this from what you've seen?
Well, good morning, Kieran. And yes, this was a request that was made to the Prime Minister in a discussion with President Obama some weeks ago, whether Australia would be prepared to extend the operations of our F-18s to include airstrikes in Syria, in addition to the existing airstrikes that are being carried out in Iraq against ISIS or Daesh. A formal request was received from the US last week. The government is obviously now giving that formal consideration, identifying the legal basis obviously for any action, but also the strategic and indeed the moral basis, and that includes also briefing the opposition. So that's a process we're going through in the course of reaching a decision in response to that request from the US.
And on the suggestion that, you know, in the Fairfax press that it was the Prime Minister's office who were pushing this, you know, it is, as you've mentioned and as is also included in this report, it was the President who raised it in the first place, though.
A request was made, it was raised with the Prime Minister by the President some weeks ago. A formal request then was sent to Australia from the US last week, and that's now being considered by the government.
All right, let's look at the Canning by-election. It looks like it's going to be a nail-biter with this poll published in the West Australian newspaper this morning, suggesting it's going to be 50-50 in the WA seat next month. Well,
Kieran, there's lots of stuff that gets thrown around in by-elections. We've got an excellent candidate in Andrew Hastie, former SAS captain, a man who's been fighting for Australia's freedom and to protect our way of life, now ready to serve the people of Canning. Can I say I had the experience 5.5 years ago of contesting a by-election. Kelly O'Dwyer and I contested by-elections respectively in Higgins and in Bradfield. And a couple of perspectives from that experience, it really does come down to your local campaigning and the local issues. Now obviously national issues are important, but the most important thing is the campaigning on the ground, and Andrew's doing a great job of that. He's got a great story to tell, he's a family man, great background in the Defence Force, a personal record of service and a commitment to serve, and I'm sure that he will run a very good campaign.
Yeah, no doubt. He's obviously a very strong candidate, I guess. A bit of a two-edged sword in some respects, though, because if there is still a big swing against this individual who is such an impressive person, 32 years of age, retired now, captain of the SAS, that would reflect a broader sentiment that's not so positive for the Abbott government.
Well, I'd say let's not get too caught up in polls and speculation. This poll, I understand, was commissioned by United Voice, which is a union. All kinds of things happen in by-elections, but Andrew, I know, is getting on with campaigning on the ground, engaging with the people of Canning, understanding their issues and explaining to them the Abbott government's policies to secure Australia's prosperity and, of course, our national security. That's what his focus will be, and that's what he needs to stay focused on.
Yeah, you're right. The West Australian reporting this morning that it was the United Voice Union. I'm going to be speaking to the political editor of the West Australian after 9 o'clock, so we'll look at actually how the poll was undertaken to establish the a bit of the detail on that. But you're right in pointing that out. Let me ask you about this effort by Defence now online through its Twitter account to take on the propaganda of Daesh. Just to return a bit to our initial story, they've set up a Twitter account to try and discredit the propaganda, very effective propaganda machine of the so-called Islamic State. You'd welcome that, a good initiative?
Look, it certainly is a sensible initiative. We clearly have an issue in Australia, as do many other similar nations, Western democracies around the world, with internet-based, online-based efforts and propaganda persuasion directed at people who might think it's a good idea to go and join ISIS or Daesh. And so it is important that there are efforts made to counter that using all the communications tools, and obviously online engagement, Twitter and other social media is extremely important, so certainly I welcome that.
And finally, the Reform Summit. We've only got less than a minute left, Paul Fletcher, but quickly, your thoughts on this, the fact that basically the business community and others reflecting a frustration at the lack of progress on reform, a lack of agenda?
Well, I think there's a big reform agenda. We've got the tax white paper, the Federation white paper. There's a lot to do, but I certainly welcome the fact that we've got a wide range of stakeholders, business, academia and so on, coming together to offer their perspectives on these important issues, things like productivity, things like the enormous digital transformation of our economy. Just last night I was at the opening in Sydney of Stone and Chalk, the new fintech hub, which is attempting to encourage businesses offering digital transformation in the financial services sector. Very exciting area. A lot of Australian corporates supporting that, so big potential.
We're out of time. Paul Fletcher, thanks so much as always. Appreciate it. A quick break. Back in just a moment here on AM Agenda. Stay with us.